Hello and welcome to Ravlic at Large. My name's Tom Ravlic. Thank you for joining me for this particular episode. Your feedback's been great. Those of you that have watched some of the interviews over the past couple of months have provided some commentary which has helped shape the way in which I'm handling some of the conversations. So thank you for your enthusiasm and robust feedback, which is useful. One of the innovators on in the news front is somebody who's isn't yet anywhere near what you would call adulthood. Six News is a YouTube based news service. It's been around for a little while. It's run by the founder and chief news anchor Leo Puglisi. Now he's done this while he's still very much in secondary school, and the channel is receiving great compliments from a range of people because it's filling a gap, particularly with its election coverage, that some people have for plain talk in terms of election results and other bits and pieces along the way. Leo's joining me today to talk about how the social media regulation landscape might impact people undertaking the establishment of other news services like Six News and a range of other things about Six News itself. Leo, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, really nice to be here.
Now, for people who don't know your history, where did Six News begin again?
Yeah, so it began in primary school for me. I was 11 years old at the time. So this is March 2019. And really just like a combination of a few interests, right? So always been, and still am, always been interested in English, particularly like non-fiction. You know, if you had to write some school activity, I'd maybe do like a mock newspaper report or something like that. You get the idea. Video editing, this was around the time, late 2010s when all the public schools, at least where I was, were getting iPads given to them. So there were always school projects to do there. And then also always been a fan of public speaking. I do school debating, school presentations, etc. And always enjoyed that. And I guess it kind of came together. Really was able to expand in 2020 because of the coverage of COVID and also bushfires, got some mainstream attention from there. And then we've been able to steadily grow. So 2025 is our 6th year.
6 years. Now, in that time, you've interviewed a range of people who you'd loosely describe as being famous. What were what were the most interesting or important interviews for you, having in the context of Six News?
Undoubtedly, that interview with the then Prime Minister Scott Morrison has to be up there, right? To have I encourage people to watch it, by the way, because it's a bit hard to describe, but it was let's just say confrontational. Not from the outset, not from my intention, but it got certainly confrontational. But I sincerely appreciate him coming on at the time, and we had up until that point, very few elected reps on, very very few. And so that was huge for us to get a sitting prime minister. That's as big as it gets, right? And then after that, shortly after, we had the then opposition leader, now Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who did promise on air to come back, and I'm sure he will again. But really, those two were just so significant for us because it really, and while we'd always tried to build it up, this gave us further legitimacy that we were getting time given to us, in-depth time from the Prime Minister and the opposition leader during an election season.
I watched the interview with Scott Morrison, and you're right. The then Prime Minister did show some signs of getting excitable. Was it? You mentioned crikey in the middle of that interview. I seem to recall he found the mere mention of crikey to be a minor irritation.
Yeah, he really didn't like crikey, did he? Or the ABC. we mentioned them, and he said he think, oh, what are you going to bring up next, the Australia Institute or something like that? And look, we were just presenting sources. If we had done the exact same work Crikey had, I'm sure we would have been able to find similar conclusions to what they did in their reporting. But look, they were perfectly, and of course I stand by them, obviously, they were perfectly legitimate questions to ask. Has he been truthful as Prime Minister? Because we want to talk about truth. So I said to Anthony Albanese, we're big on facts, we're big on the truth. And, it was important questions to ask. I'm glad we asked them. I had no intention of making him, have a start of back and forth. It was literally 1-2 questions planned, but it kept going back and forth, and I'm glad we kept pushing back because that's what we should be doing. And yeah, I'm really happy with how that interview was conducted, not by just myself, of course. With me was our political editor, Roman McKinnon. I was 14 at the time, by the way. Roman was 13 at the time, and he helped to organise that interview, and it was just great, I think, from both of us. And it was amazing to see the reaction it got, not just in Australia, but even in New Zealand over there, they covered it too.
It was an interesting interview. The thing that brought out, if we can riff on that for a moment, is that the politicians can't control the question that's being asked, right? In terms of tactics, how you deal with things that you don't necessarily find comfortable. They can control the way they answer them, right? And it's typically the way they answer them that reveals discomfort or that reveals their capacity to deal with issues that are contentious. So, for example, if you're watching politicians on the ABC or Sky News get grilled and they can't handle a certain line of questioning, then you begin to wonder, how does that translate into management of a portfolio? How does that translate into general people management if a simple question is what takes them off the fairway and into the rough? The interesting thing is you've been expanding your team over the years, and you've expanded your election coverage. We've mentioned the election coverage from last election briefly, but you've done a heck of a lot more work in improving the way in which you present election coverage. What have you done to enhance it?
It's a great question, and it was not often in when we're talking about 2022, early 2022, that we'd be doing live streaming stuff. So it was really significant that we were able to do live coverage at that federal election. But we've expanded now, so we've got panels on. We've got guests that come in. We're able to read the chat a lot more. It's a lot more organised. Our on-screen presentation is a lot clearer with seat counts and vote counts that make it really easy. You switch us on at a quick glance and you're able to see all that info. But we have, I think, gone every single state and territory election since then. So what comes to mind, we had 2022 Victoria, 2023 New South Wales, 2024. So last year, huge for us, right? We had one weekend was Queensland local government, because we do local government election live coverage as well. No one else does that. The exact next weekend was the Tasmanian state election. We had ACT. We had various by-elections. We had the NT. We had New South Wales local. And these are things that we're really able to do uniquely. No one else is covering these. And so our live coverage has really been able to expand. I'm really happy about that. It's going to be huge for both WA and federal this year. And I'm so looking forward to it, because it is really, I think it is some of the best work we do all year. And I'm sad that there's only probably, unless we get some snap election or something else, we're only going to get 2 elections where we can do live coverage this year, as I said, WA and federal. Although I'll just mention as well, last year we were also able to do the UK and the US, which I'm really happy about as well.
So you want more elections?
I do. I really love covering them. I don't think anyone. You
want more. You want more. So you would not like the fact that Albanese has proposed a 4-year fixed term, because that would mean you'd have to wait 4 years for a federal election.
Oh, look, I mean, in fairness, I'm not firm on the view one way or the other on that idea. I think I wouldn't mind having a set date at the minimum, even if it is 3 years. My biggest concern, if it's 4 years, is that the Senate would be really screwed up. We're talking about like 8-year Senate terms or something. Personally, I just rather a set date, and I think the last Saturday in May is the best possible day. Let's not do April or anything like that. The proposed date they're talking about right now falls on the AFL's gather round. I'm going to be interstate in Adelaide on the supposed weekend of the federal election. That'd be really inconvenient for me. So if we can not do that, that'd be ideal.
Have you written to the Prime Minister to ask him not to do things on the gather round?
I haven't, but look, he's a Hawthorn supporter. I'm a Hawthorn supporter. Maybe I can make a bit of a personal appeal. We can. I just really hope he doesn't. It would be inconvenient, but and also I think inconvenient for people voting. But let's just hope not.
Okay. 6 News is based on YouTube. It is a social media native outlet. You started it relatively young by comparison to some of the old cats that are still around in the media and themselves doing stuff on the internet. The social media ban legislation that was debated very briefly before Parliament rose at the end of November caused some concerns for you. It subsequently passed. How do you reflect on the passage of that legislation now in January 2025?
Yeah, I think concerned is a bit of an understatement. Look, I mean, I think I'd probably go with the same viewpoint that I did with when it was happening at the time. Insanely rushed. The speed of that legislation for such a significant thing, and to do it on literally the last possible day, was just madness. And I think that's really concerning for consultation. And if the government can say that they're going to do a year of consultation, we have to remember, by the way, we don't know what the government will be in a few months. Like, we have to kind of remember that. Like, everything could change in really a few weeks. So that's, important to consider here. But ultimately, just unbelievably rushed, and the amount of confusion that we had in the weeks leading up to it, this back and forth on what platforms would be included, how it would be enforced. In the last minute, we're saying, no, you can't have any mandated ID. And then how would it be enforced at all? And are they going to use some kind of AI technology? It was just unbelievably rushed. And I think that's a real concern. And Look, I am hoping that it's not as rushed over this year than the process to implement it. Not that I want to implement it at all, but yeah, I think just looking back, I just can't believe how fast it was. The last day, the last hours on a random Thursday night, and what was it? Late November, right? It was just insanity.
The fascinating thing pointed out by Senator Matt Canavan that night was that there were channels on the internet that were streaming the parliamentary debate. And they ended up having more people watching the debate through an alternate channel than the official Parliament YouTube site at the time, if I recall correctly. It's an interesting little observation made by Senator Canavan about the power of social media, but also about the this is a family program, so I need to use language that is suitable for polite people. The silliness of imposing a ban on particular platforms, where those platforms like Facebook are used by sort of families for sport, coordinating sport, for example, or communicating with sports teams, etc. How do you feel about that? Because you'd be talking to kids at school about some of this as well, won't you?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, something like Facebook. I mean, I don't think most teenagers use Facebook, or at least use it regularly in this country. I certainly don't use it regularly, but I think the discussion around what apps are going to be included, I think was also really concerning, because it was very clearly being done by people who don't understand these apps, or don't understand what teenagers use them for. If I remember correctly, the initial proposal, or the initial campaign, I think it might have been the one that News Corp was backing. I don't remember exactly, but it was the initial thing. So we're talking like May, June-ish of last year, that the Prime Minister
Yep.
endorsed. Um, included LinkedIn as one of the possible banned platforms. LinkedIn. Now, I don't know what harmful content is on LinkedIn. And you have to remember, even LinkedIn themselves, they put out a statement saying their content is too boring, essentially, for teenagers under the age of 16. It was getting ridiculous. And until the last minute as well, YouTube was going to be banned. I'm glad they reversed on that for a multitude of reasons. But that was ridiculous. Snapchat was going to be exempt. Then they included it. And Snapchat's got many of its so to speak, well-documented problems with predatory behavior, potentially on there, and other concerning stuff.
Well,
Snapchat in itself is a whole problem, but the fact that they weren't talking about banning that in itself was just extraordinary.
Well, I actually went on to Snapchat when people said it was going to be exempt, to actually see what it looked like. Being slightly older fogey than you are. And I was somewhat concerned that whenever I opened the app, I would see videos that were not explicit but suggestive coming up on screen. I'm thinking, I didn't ask for this. Why am I seeing this, and that in this particular feed? Now, if you had, contrast with using X, for example, I think Snapchat would be far more problematic for me than a platform like X.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, as I said, Snapchat's got its own issues. I don't particularly use it much, but you're right. Some of the recommendations, it's not. I don't think it's as it's not like Instagram Reels. I don't think it's like TikTok as well. It's a weird platform at times, to be blunt. But of course, Twitter's, which is included, has many of its own problems, as has been well established, especially
Yep.
since the Elon Musk takeover, which is a whole separate issue. But again, the reality is harmful content and non-harmful content can exist on all of these platforms, including some of the exempt ones, because they're considered messaging. What are we doing with Discord, for instance? Again, has its own well-documented problems regarding predatory behavior. But we're not having conversations about keeping kids safe on these platforms. We're saying we're going to ban them, and well, we'll see what happens if they get around it. That's just not a viable way to do this thing. And the reality is that when a 14-year-old gets around this ban, and let's say they see something that is genuinely harmful on Twitter, for instance, something that is to the level where you'd be reporting it to the safety commissioner, or even the police, or even just your parents, where are they going to go to? Because technically they're not supposed to be on there. Technically, they're not supposed to, and okay, they just got around it. It's going to make it less safe, because these kids are going to essentially be, there's no punishment if they're breaking the law per se, but they are going to be breaking it officially. And so you have to remember, you've got to keep them safe. You've got to have avenues to keep them safe. You've got to have avenues for them to keep others safe and to report harmful content. It's going to be harder if they're considered outlaws just for using a platform when they're 15 and not 16.
The other problem you've got is that the moderation of those platforms may become lax, because the law says, well, if they're below 16, they they shouldn't be on there, so we don't have to worry about stuff that people below 16 might be harmed by. Let's worry about.
I was just going to say as well, just quickly before I forget, this could
Please
be a
do.
pitfall. these platforms could do something as simple as change their terms of service in the Australian App Store to say, you must be over the age of 16 or something like that. And we all know people don't read terms of service, they don't read terms and conditions, they just click agree and move on. Well, they officially clicked agree, so what are we supposed to do? Like it's just not viable. And none of this addresses the harmful content. None of it's taken down, none of it's removed. It all still exists, and it's all still going to be a problem. This ban doesn't do anything, to be blunt.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is who is to determine what is harmful? Now, as far as I can tell, given the politicians I deal with up in Canberra when I fly up there, given the the various regulators I've dealt with over the years, as well intentioned as they may be, Leo, I can't see how the regulators that we deal with can be able to determine in their own right what's going to harm any individual below 16 or over it, because there will be times when somebody writing about their relationship on X and doing all the we meditate, we slept, blah blah blah, whatever, and that may trigger a painful memory for someone. It may trigger something else, and that may be the most harmful thing that person sees on social media all week. But because they're above the age of 16, and that's okay. Whereas something that you might somebody may regard as being harmful may not be seen as that same individual that's had a traumatic experience reading about a busted up relationship on X that reminds them of their own. Something another person regards as traumatic, that person might shrug their shoulders and say, "Meh." It's a subjective space. And I encourage anyone watching this to go and look at the speech delivered in 2006 by Christopher Hitchens in Canada in a part of a debate on free speech. He makes that point excellently about government censorship, and this takes it down the road of government censorship, I guess. You appeared before the parliamentary committee, and you had one member of parliament basically tell you they were old, right? I think it was Zoe McKenzie.
I think a few of them did.
And then a few of them are old, but they wouldn't admit to it. But if we take that, and I'll probably pay for that next time I go to Canberra, trust me. It's on video. Yes, it's on video. I might even clip that just to show them. But I saw your presentation to the Senate. How did you feel making the opening statement, and did you prepare it?
I did not prepare it. No, that was completely off the fly. No notes written down, nothing. I just, kind of went for it. I think because they'd emailed and the way they reached out. I think, they'd mentioned that you could give an opening statement, and, I never declined it. I didn't exactly want to say, "Oh, I pass, please." I'm like, no, I've just got a free reign here. And so I just kind of went off, and I said it pretty fast, and it was just kind of naturally how I spoke, but I'm actually really happy with how it came out. But it was a really exciting experience to be able to do that. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a real privilege to be able to be at that committee. A committee, by the way, for those who haven't seen it yet, I will just note, did not recommend a blanket ban for under 16s, by the way, that parliamentary committee, but what do they know? No, I enjoyed it so much, and I like to hope that there was some impact that came from what I had to say and what other people had to say as well with similar viewpoints on this issue.
What was it like sitting at the other end of copying questions from people that you may ordinarily be asking questions of? Because that's an interesting experience.
Yeah, it's weird because, look, I've done interviews with journalists. I've interviewed journalists, but I've interviewed MPs. I've never had MPs ask me the questions, especially when I'm not not prepared isn't the right word, but also I didn't know what they were going to ask. I knew the very vague topic outline, and I think the first question was about algorithms, and look, I was pretty blunt in their response. It's just not something I look at. We just post and we hope what gets views. But was able to get a bit more in detail when we were discussing age limits on social media, and there was one moment where I was asked about, oh, why do you think Discord shouldn't be banned? And I'm like, well, I've never said that. And apparently someone's wrong submission had been messed up with mine, because I hadn't made like a written submission beforehand. But it was all really fun, and I really enjoyed being able to do that. I'm very happy to do other committees. It was fun, and as I said, I just hope there was some impact that came out of it. But I like to think MPs are taking notice of 6 News. Monique Ryan mentioned us in a speech just before the social media ban was passed. Matt Canavan has mentioned us before in the Victorian Parliament. David Limbrick was asking the Premier questions about us. And so, we're getting a lot of bipartisan attention. I think that's really important. Yes, we'll be holding these MPs to account for obvious reasons, but the fact is people in power are taking notice of 6 News, and I think that's really important, and shows the level of reach we're able to get.
The other thing that's actually a humbling experience, and I appeared before a parliamentary committee in the early part of 2004 for the first time. And I appeared before Senator Stephen Conroy and Senator Andrew Murray. And it was on corporate law, accounting and auditing matters, really exciting stuff for most of the people out there who would probably think auditing and accounting is a natural cure for insomnia. But it was interesting to be at the other end of a robust set of questions from Andrew Murray. And we missed that sort of... There aren't that many people in Parliament like Andrew Murray these days. He used to be with the Australian Democrats. And he played me around the park a little bit. And you learn from that experience. It was fascinating. And then in February of 2005, I walked into another committee hearing representing the Institute of Public Accountants, National Institute of Accountants as it was then, and delivered some evidence on accounting standards. Again, interesting experience. You learn a lot. Where is 6 News at in terms of the head count of people? Because I've seen you posting regularly, and your team posting regularly that they've been upgraded in roles and titles. How many of you are there?
It's a good question, and I'm terrible at math, so I never really count. But
you mean you don't know how many of you there are?
No, well, look, we've got some freelancers. Well, give or take, it's about 10 people who are regularly able to contribute. But many have been here for years. Lincoln Holmes, our senior reporter in Melbourne, and Darby Travers, our senior presenter. They've been there since mid-2020. That is just incredible to think about, that they have been participating for so long. Some of these people have been with us, have graduated high school since they started, and they're still working, and they're able to move on to major networks, and it's great. So we've got a really small team, but it's a passionate one, and that's something I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't passionate about it, and they're the exact same. It's just something we really love doing for viewers and for people who are watching, and for who are looking for media outside of the existing major players.
What are you looking at doing more of or better in 2025?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, we'll be continuing the live federal and state election coverage. I really look forward to that. We're going to be doing a lot more video content on platforms like TikTok, maybe some voter education stuff. I think it's really important that young people who might be voting for the first time are informed about political processes and systems, etc., etc. But not just young people, of course, everyone. A lot more video content on YouTube. We're going to be trying out some new styles, getting some more engaging content. And then, of course, we'll be continuing our live 24/7 operations. We've been streaming constantly. We just set up a partnership with Youth Jam Radio over in Perth, where hoping to be establishing more partnerships in 2025 with other existing independent and youth media. But look, it's a big year ahead, plenty to come. And it's weird because, after the federal election, when it could be as held, late, let's say it's even just late May, that's a lot of a year where we don't have anything to plan for. So it's exciting times.
And you've got to gather around. You want to go and see in Adelaide?
I do. I am very hopeful. Very
You're not coping with the prospect of not going to the gather round, are you?
Well, I want to because we've bought the tickets, but also I really, really don't want to be doing live coverage off my laptop in a hotel room. So it's a tough one to weigh up.
Leo, as always, it's been a pleasure to touch base with you. Where do people find you and 6 News?
Yeah, so the main platform I'm active on is Twitter at Leo_Puglisi 6 PUGLISI for 6 News. It's 6 News AU, so that's the numeral, not the word. That's on all the major platforms. For those who have jumped ship to Blue Sky, we're also on and active there, but you can tune in if you're wanting to actually watch live 24/7. Just look up 6 News. Should be able to find us pretty quickly on YouTube. It's great. A few years ago, we weren't. When you looked up 6 News, it was just getting some random US TV stations. The fact we're able to come up first now in Australia when you look up 6 News is just a very small thing, but something I'm really proud of. So just look up 6 News. Should be able to find us. We're on YouTube live 24/7, and you can find all our other contact details up there.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Good to catch up again.
Anytime. Thanks so much.
And that was Leo Puglisi, the founder and chief anchor for 6 News. Check them out. They're on there regularly. And also keep an eye on their election coverage because they are being watched by people who want an alternative. They're a great bunch of people who want to make a difference, and they are. Stay tuned for another episode of Ravlic at Large in the next little while. Next week is going to be a big week for interviews. I've got several people lined up on issues that are going to be really important and really fascinating for you. But in the meantime, take care of each other and stay safe.